Hello fellow riders, today I'm going to be going over my top 3 settings for the Segway Ninebot Max G2 within the Segway Ninebot app. Now, keep in mind, some of these settings aren't as simple as toggling a switch within the app itself. Some require corresponding settings on the scooter. So, to learn more about these, as well as a host of other features and functionality, stay tuned. I'm going to be jumping into the app now. Alright, so now that I've got the Segway Ninebot app open and connected to Bluetooth, I'm going to go ahead and power the scooter on by swiping to the right. First thing you're going to see, top left, is the estimated range that you've got based, 1, off of the battery charge that you have, and 2, most importantly, the drive mode that you're in. Right now, I'm in sports mode, estimated range 21 miles. If I switch that to eco mode, that jumps to 37 miles. If I switch it again to drive mode, that drops to 26. So that's really important to keep in mind. If you're seeing a lower number than expected, it could be the drive mode that you're currently in. So now that we've covered that, if you scroll down in the app, you'll see some tasks for beginners, some general settings, track records, the ability to record your rides. I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to jump straight into the functions. Now, the first option you have is the light effect, and that is really just the behavior of your tail light when you hit the brakes. By default, you hit the brakes, the tail light gets brighter. If you want the tail light to flash when you hit the brakes, you can do that too. Might help with visibility. I keep it to brighter when braking. The next option in the function menu is cruise mode. This is cruise control. So by default, it's disabled, but you have the ability to go in here and choose what behaviors enable cruise control. The first one is holding onto the turn indicator for greater than 3 seconds while traveling at your desired speed. If you do that, it will lock you into that speed. The other behavior is to enable it by holding onto the throttle for 5 seconds at any given speed. And that will also enable cruise control. I prefer, when this mode is enabled, to use the direction indicator for 3 seconds, but I typically ride around with this disabled. And that takes me to one of my top 3 settings for the Segway Ninebot Max G2 within the Segway app, and that is energy recovery. So, what is energy recovery? Energy recovery is regenerative braking. So let's say you're zipping along on your scooter and you release the throttle, you'll feel the electronic brake kick in. If you have it set to weak, you'll feel it. It's not going to be that great. If you set it to medium or strong, you'll absolutely feel that electronic brake, and at certain thresholds, it will eventually start sending juice back to the battery to help recharge your battery. Some people like to set it to strong. As they cruise around, if they want to slow down, they just release the throttle. They don't have to use the left-hand brake, which controls the front drum brake. So if you're into driving with the throttle, speed up, slow down, strong might be good for you. For me, I like to set this either at weak or medium. And now we're at number 2 of 3 for my top settings to set for the Segway Ninebot Max G2, and that is the charging limit. Now, we are creatures of habit. You plug your device in, it charges to 100%, you unplug it, you use it, you charge it, you unplug it, you use it. That's the behavior we get into. Now, from a battery health perspective, it's not always great to continually charge the battery to 100%. So, Segway gives you the option to set the maximum charge limit. Now, after most of the rides that I do, I have 50 or 60% battery left. They're not long rides, so I'm never using all the battery capacity. So it doesn't quite make sense for me to charge it all the way to 100% just to bring it down to 60 or 50 and then charge it to 100, 60 or 50 again. I'm more than fine charging it to say 85%. And you'll see they give you the option to set the max charge limit to 80%, from anywhere from 80% to 100%. For me, 85 is the sweet spot. And you can see the note below, lower charging limit will prolong battery life. I'm all for that. The next function we're going to look at is start speed. Now, start speed is the speed at which the scooter needs to be moving for the throttle to become active. So by default, it's set to 1.8 miles an hour. So you've got to give the scooter a good kick. Once you hit 1.8 miles an hour, you can hit the throttle and the motor will kick in and you will move along. I leave that at the default setting. I personally don't like the idea of setting it to 0 because if I'm holding the scooter, manipulating it, and I hit that throttle, I don't want the wheels spinning unexpectedly. So I keep it at 1.8. You've got the ability to set miles per hour, kilometers per hour, all that fun stuff. The scooter does have a locking function. You can come in here, enable that, and you can set a code to unlock the scooter. I don't need that complexity in my life. I'm not walking around leaving the scooter places, nor do I recommend doing that. So I won't go into detail on the locking function. The next function here is the direction indicator sound. So for your left and right turn signal, you have the ability to also have the little sound, which actually comes from the horn. It's just not as intense as the horn. It's the same beeping, so it beeps every time the light flashes. If you like that, similar to what you expect in a car, great, you can enable it. I keep it off. I will say though, having that beeping sound is helpful because I have found myself accidentally leaving the turn signals on for who knows how many miles and probably confusing everybody around me. There's an option here to enable an abnormality alert for any strange vibrations. I've never really gotten into that. And now that takes us to number 3 of my top 3 settings within the Segway Ninebot app for the Segway Ninebot Max G2, and that is custom settings of sport mode. If you want to unleash your wild side and set the max speed to 22 miles an hour, and that's specifically for people in the US, absolutely, you can do it. First, you want to make sure that sport mode here is enabled, and when you come into custom settings of sport mode, you might see that it's already set to a maximum of 20 miles an hour. Well, what the heck? Where's 22 miles an hour? How do I enable that? Important point. You have to make sure that the scooter is in sport mode. So if I click back, look at my scooter, I see D, drive mode. Double click, I am now in sports mode. So when I click on custom settings of sport mode, bada boom, bada bang, 22 miles an hour. I can set it to 22. And now I can go zipping along, letting my wild side out. Absolutely fantastic. Click back, all is ready to go. So if you find yourself going in to adjust the speed and you don't see 22, make sure your scooter is in sport mode, and that's specifically for scooters in the US. And finally at the bottom you've got Segway Ninebot Lab. I think these are some experimental features. You click into here, you've got the traction control system. It'll be pretty interesting to see how that works out. It's a single motor vehicle, so traction control on one wheel. I'm sure it's fantastic. One thing to keep in mind is that I have read that the traction control system, when enabled, can make it a little more difficult for the scooter to climb hills. So if you're doing a lot of hill climbing on non-slippery surfaces, surfaces that don't have dirt, they're not wet, all that fun stuff, maybe turn this off, especially if you're going up steep hills. I would much rather make it up the hill than have something enabled that I'm probably not going to use anyways. And the last thing here is locating the vehicle. This is the Find My app functionality, which is compatible with iOS devices. I have set that up. This is where you're going to do it. It took me a while to find this. I wasn't exactly sure where it would be in the function menu. It is in the Ninebot Lab section. And that is a wrap of my top 3 settings to set within the Segway Ninebot app. As always, thank you so much for tuning into my channel. If there's any content that you'd like to see me create, let me know in the comments. And in the meantime, thank you so much. We'll see you next time.